So we can expect that others will continue to join us, but again, because we've got so much on our agenda, I think I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Tim Leibarger. I'm the founder and executive director of Encore NEO, where we help people age 50 plus design and build new careers around the things that especially inspire them. I also sit on the program committee for the Encore Network, and along with Doug Dixon, am the co-chair of the Over 50 Affinity Group. For those who are perhaps new with us, maybe not familiar with the Encore Network, the Encore Network is a coalition of leaders who champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people age 50 plus by creating community, stimulating learning, and inspiring action to transform the Encore stage of life. We're excited to bring this webinar to you today on the Age-Friendly Employer's Guide, which we'll be revealing to the public for the first time here. As we do this, I'd like to especially recognize the Age-Friendly Institute as a sponsor of the guide. We're extremely grateful for their support in this. We'll be hearing from Tim Driver, the CEO of the Age-Friendly Institute, as one of our panelists. Again, I thank you, Tim, and the Age-Friendly Institute. Now, so today our focus, as I've already mentioned, will be introducing the new Age-Friendly Employer Guide and identifying ways that members can use it in their work and to help promote it. So the specific goals for our session today are to, number one, briefly review the contents of the guide and how it was created, to hear from endorsers and others on why they see this as an important breakthrough, to offer tools and approaches for members to use in promoting the guide, and engage members in conversation about the next steps and commitments. The agenda is laid out in 4 basic steps. First, we're going to hear from Doug Dixon, who will give us a run through of the different sections of the guide and explain how it is designed to be used. Next, we'll hear from 3 panel members as they offer their insights on the best ways to engage employers around this all-important topic of employing older workers. After the panel, Doug will return to introduce the initial campaign to promote the guide, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Logistically, as we get started here, I remind you to please mute yourself during the webinar so background noise doesn't interfere with the ability of everyone to hear and participate without distraction. And you can continue to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions, comments, thoughts that you have. We'll retain all of that, and that'll be useful information for us as we go forward with this initiative. This event is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email for this event sometime in the next few days with a link to the recording. So why don't we jump right into this? And Doug, I'm going to invite you to get started with an introduction to the guide.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Tim. And this is an exciting time for all of us who have been involved in this project over a period of months. I'll start by telling a little bit more about how we decided to go forward with this and what we've been doing in the months since we made that decision, and the opportunity today to share what we've been working on with all of you. This got started as a result of, as Tim mentioned, some work that the Over 50 Employment Affinity Group has been doing, looking at some of the campaigns, some of the work, some of the opportunities that we've kind of tested in our work over the last few years. So we looked at, for example, work that was being done in Palm Beach County, some work that was being done in Boston, some work that was being done by changing the narrative in Colorado, and so on. We looked at the CAFE program that was developed by Tim Driver, and you'll learn more about in a few moments. We looked at the AARP Employer Pledge Program, and so on. And out of that exploration came a decision, basically a challenge laid down by Janine Vanderberg, and anybody who knows Janine knows how she can do that. And we took up the gauntlet and decided to work together to fill a gap. And basically the gap has to do with the challenges of communicating, conveying the information that we all see on a regular basis, because this is our business, we pay attention to these things, and translate that into language, into a format, into a more organized way of presenting this information for employers. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. So the months that we've been spending working on this have been basically culling through the last 10 years of really compelling and convincing research about the value of older workers. And I have to confess that as closely as I've paid attention to this, I didn't know everything that was out there. And there were some things in this process that I rediscovered. And I think that was true for all of us. So in a sense, this represents a curation of the research that's been done over the last several years, and finding a way to present it as simply and as accessibly as possible. So here is let me share the guide. Give you a peek at what it looks like. Okay, can you all see that? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Am I good? I'm on the right page. Good.
Yes.
So here's the guide. This is the cover. You can see we've titled it "Age is Now a Strategic Imperative," and we sort of deliver on that on the promise of that title in the content of the guide. So we start with an introduction. We talk about the value proposition that older workers present to employers. We talk about the policies and practices that employers can take advantage of in making adjustments to become age-friendly. We talk about some of the insights that can be helpful to employers as they think about how to accommodate the interests of older workers and how to find them. And then we tackle the myths about older workers head on by showing how they're refuted by the research. And finally, we have a section on resources. Before we go further, I want to, as Tim did, acknowledge the Age-Friendly Institute, which is the home of the Certified Age-Friendly Employer program that I know Tim Driver will be talking more about in a couple of minutes. And we very much appreciate their sponsorship of the guide. And in not too long a time, we'll be announcing another sponsor of the guide. And hopefully there'll be more coming down the line. So we start the guide with two trends, basically calling out the reason why employers should be paying more attention to older workers. This is the strategic imperative. People are living longer, and as a result, you can see from this chart that the workforce is shrinking at ages below 55. The workforce is growing only among older workers. So at some point, this is going to catch, it already has caught up with employers, and we are seeing some progress. This is, we're hoping that with this guide, we'll be able to reinforce the progress that's being made and add to it. You can see that older workers in the workforce have doubled in the last 30 years. And then those of you who have seen any of Janine Vanderberg's presentations will recognize this chart, which basically says the birth rate is falling, which compounds the issue in terms of the impact on employers. So this sets the stage for everything that follows. We talk about the guide and how to use it. We make some acknowledgments. By the way, here I'd like to pause and thank a number of people, including all of the members of the over 50 employment affinity group who have contributed in various ways to this guide, and members of the advocacy affinity group who have helped to create the campaign both to launch and to continue to bring attention to the guide over time. And there are some individuals who are mentioned here: Deborah Albert, Karen Brown, Kelly Kears, Tim Leibarger, Lori Peterson, Monica Schaefer, and Janine Vanderberg, who have sort of comprised an editorial team. And then Susan Callahan, who has been our designer and who has contributed many hours, many more than I think she anticipated in bringing this to fruition. So the first thing that we talk about in the guide is why older workers are helpful. What's the value that they bring to employers? And here we've broken it down into 5 categories. So sort of the obvious starting point is they have talent, they have skills, they have experience that organizations can take advantage of. They also bring a lot of institutional knowledge and can mentor and support younger workers, particularly as they reach the end of their careers. They bring workforce stability. Not only do they actually stay in their jobs longer than workers of other ages, but they're more engaged. And the research is very interesting in making the case that that when older workers are present in the workforce, younger workers stay in their jobs longer as well. So they have a stabilizing effect on the workforce. They work as well, they perform as well as workers of other ages, and they in fact enhance productivity. And this is partly because work teams that have a larger spread of age tend to be much more productive and much more innovative. So if you've got teams with a narrower age base, you tend to suffer in terms of productivity and innovation. Then there's the sort of cumulative effect of all of this. Companies that have more stable workforces, that have higher productivity, that are more innovative, are also more profitable. And there's a huge value add to the economy as well. The next section is a checklist. And this is presented in a way that allows employers to take a look at, in 7 different categories, how their current policies and practices stack up against those that are exhibited by the most age-friendly employers. So this can be used in a variety of ways, both as an assessment, but also as a way to get new ideas and as a kind of checklist for progress. So we look at talent management strategies. We look at how organizations use language and images. We look at all of the issues around creating a welcoming culture for employees of all ages, but in addition, younger, or rather older workers. And then the process of hiring and recruiting, of retention, and then the imperative of continued training and professional development. Nobody does well in the workforce if they're ignored. And for too long, that's tended to be the case for older workers. And then there are a number of job design opportunities as well. The next section is designed to provide some insight for employers about why older workers want to continue to work. And this is kind of a mystery for some people. They can't quite figure it out. They tend to think that people want to work only if they need the money. And as you can see from this chart, that's true for pre-retirees. It's not at all true for post-retirees. Not to say that people can't use the money and don't work because of the money, but it's not their primary motivation. There are a lot of other things that are important in terms of staying mentally active, in terms of social connection, and so on. Then we look at the whole concept of age. It's not just biological years. It has a lot of other components, and I think it's helpful for employers to understand what those components are. And finally, we take a look at the ways in which older workers are working. So a number of them are continuing to work for a previous employer. A significant number go back to their previous employer in a new role, oftentimes part-time roles. Then there are bridge workers that find part-time jobs for somebody else. And then those who are self-employed, on-call workers and gig workers. The message here for employers is that the sweet spot for recruiting and bringing workers back into their organizations are those that have left them in the first place. And there are a number of examples of organizations that have crafted ways to bring workers back, and those that have gone on to work for someone else. The next section, as I mentioned earlier, is tackling the common myths about older workers head on, and showing the research that refutes all of those myths. And then finally, we have a resource section, and this is not a bibliography. This is not an exhaustive list. This is not a set of endnotes, although many of these resources are referred to elsewhere in the guide. But the purpose of this section is to provide what we think are some of the best resources for individuals working for organizations to take a deeper dive, to gather more extensive information so that they can fill in the gaps as they're learning about the value of older workers from these resources, these studies, these reports that we believe are most useful for that purpose. And then there's a list of tools and toolkits. So that's the guide. That's what it looks like. That is our first version. I think it's important to say that this is not a static document. This is not a static environment in which we operate. There will be new studies. There will be information that we believe is useful to add. There will be broken links that we'll have to fix. So there's a lot of maintenance that will go into this, but we'll make those adjustments as we go. And periodically we will take a look at this and make certain that it's doing the job that we want it to. We'll also pay attention to the kind of response that we're getting and make some adjustments based on that. For example, we've thought a bit about the implementation process and the challenges that employers face along those lines. You know, many of them may want to do the right thing. They don't know how to get started. So that may be something that we'll add, and there may be some other things as well. So I think that is everything that I wanted to say. So Tim, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Good. Thanks very much, Doug, for a great introduction to this super resource that we're going to take a closer look at and get some additional perspective on now. So let me, well, it's with great pleasure that I introduce our panelists, and there are three folks participating in this. Lisa Jensen, who is the program manager of the Boulder Workforce Center, Kelly Kears, career development practice lead for Oracle, and Tim Driver, CEO of the Age Friendly Institute. Lisa, why don't we start with you? What is your experience on this?
Thank you, Tim. I have both personal and professional experience with this. So after I worked at a large university for 23 years in a variety of leadership roles, I was laid off when COVID budget cuts eliminated the pilot program that I was working on. And I thought it would be easy to get another job because I hadn't actually applied or interviewed to a job in over 20 years. All of the jobs I had gotten had been promotions or through colleagues. And so the current application and interview process was something I had to learn over again. So after I got laid off, for the next 14 months, I applied to over 70 jobs. I earned a new credential to update my skills. I revised my resume many times and networked as much as I could in COVID times. Finally, after revising my job search strategies so many times, I was hired as a program manager at Workforce Boulder County. What changed in my approach that made the difference was revising my resume to be a targeted resume. And this sounds ridiculously simple as a solution to 14 months of frustration, but I would like to explain. As an older job seeker, I have a lot of experience, and I wanted to put that experience and my accomplishments on that resume. My first resume was 5 pages long, and I know all of you employers know that nobody looked at that. In the resume workshop that I finally attended, realizing I needed to do something different, after 12 months of trying, I learned how to match the words in my resume with the words in the job posting, how to reframe my experience in the terms and phrases directly from the job posting. This simple change resulted in 100% of my applications getting an invitation to interview, and shortly after I got hired. What happened? Here I was with a lot of skills, a lot of experience in project management, program development, a new HR credential, and a lot of enthusiasm to work. And yet the door stayed closed to almost every application. I have employers now who ask me, where are all the older job seekers? We want to hire them. And my answer is, they're in your inbox. They're knocking at your door. But perhaps you have a screening process that is eliminating their applications from the get-go. If your screening process uses that system of word matching, whether it's artificial intelligence software or it's a poor overworked HR individual, that you're just using this terminology matching, then you may be missing out on a lot of candidates from diverse backgrounds who are not using this method in their applications. I'm not suggesting that you are intentionally screening out older workers. It's the system that's designed to be more efficient, but it is not universally understood, as I illustrated in my case. This might be just one barrier that you're putting up to older job seekers. You may be also keeping them from applying at all by having only photos of young people on your website, using jargon like digital native, or asking for graduation dates on your application that is going to feel like the older job seeker is going to feel a little intimidated that they're going to experience bias against them. So these are just some of the things that are reviewed in this tool. And so I highly recommend that you look into your processes, including your screening process, and look at it with a human eye, see who is actually applying, see who is not getting through that screening process. Here at Workforce Boulder County, we're doing everything we can to train older job seekers in the current ways of applying and interviewing for jobs. But it's up to you to think about the ways your process is not serving you. You may be turning away the people you want. This tool will help you evaluate that. Thanks for letting me share here today.
Lisa, thank you very much. I'm sure that a number of people can identify with your experience around that perpetual search and frustrations associated with it. Kelly, how about you? Why don't we jump to you for a moment?
Sure. Thanks, Tim. And it's great to be here. I am, as Tim mentioned, I work for a large technology company. I work in learning and career development. So our focus is to help employees build their skills and also grow their careers within the company. And I would say on our 50+ affinity group, I'm sort of more unusual in that I work within a corporation. A lot of people in the group are working outside of organizations trying to help people, 50 plus workers, move in. But my interest in this topic really started with my own experience, similar to what Lisa was saying. Mine was more, I hit midlife and I realized my relationship to work was changing. It was really, I felt different about it. And so I started to get curious and I started reading, and I read, the first book I read was actually The Big Shift by Mark Friedman, but I read The Big Shift and 100-Year Life, and I just started doing all of this research and going on this quest to better understand aging and longevity and the workforce. And then I had the benefit of a great organization where I was able to actually take that interest and make it one of my work goals. And I did a bunch of research over the course of a year of going to webcasts, reading articles. And as Doug mentioned, there is such a wealth of information out there. And I was kind of on my own searching and trying to find it. I did do that and compile all of my information and presented it to my HR colleagues. But if I had had this guide when I started this, it would have been such a value to me. This guide takes all of that research, all the work that I did, not exactly the same things, but that wealth of information that's very scattered, and pulls it together in a really concise, clear document, but also a great argument for older workers. Like, why should we care? Why should employers really be thinking about this? So I think it's a wonderful piece, and it's been great, working with everybody on it. And I was very impressed with this volunteer organization pulling this thing together. So I'll stop there with my endorsement, but I think it's going to be a great value.
Okay, thanks so much. It's important to hear from the insiders, your perspective on this, and your contributions to the Affinity Group have been terrific. Thanks so much for that. Tim, your comments?
Great. Thank you, Tim. And good day to everybody. I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'm really excited about the guide. So congratulations on it. We're so happy to be helping to support it and just getting more and more people educated on this topic, which is so incredibly important. We are, as I think everybody on this call is, incredibly passionate about this topic and look at it from a ton of different angles. And I think I wanted to respond to some of the chat commentary here, and maybe suggest, I'm going to put up on my screen, if it's okay with you, hopefully I can share just a couple of testimonials from employers, because I think that that's what's necessary to convey here too. So just a little bit of background before I sort of drill into a couple of employers here. So the Age Friendly Institute, as I think you heard from Doug, runs the CAFE program, which is what we call it for short, Certified Age Friendly Employer. And the purpose of that program, the reason we started it almost 20 years ago, at the time when we started it, it was part of retirementjobs.com, which is a career site for people over 50. And the reason that we came up with this was to help older adult job seekers save a little time by first knocking on the door of an employer more likely to welcome them than to shun them, which is still the case all too often. The folks who are part of the employer CAFE program are sort of the vocal minority, as I call them, because they're the ones who have said, yes, this is a good idea for a variety of reasons. And it's that variety of reasons, I think, Doug and you all have done a great job with the guide illustrating many of them, maybe even all of them. What I think is challenging for our group, our employer outreach group, which is growing in size now, is sort of identifying what is the headline for this employer. And I'm going to go through a couple of headlines here, but what we do is, and we talk to hundreds of employers. There are several hundred now that are certified. There are 400 or 500 that are in the pipeline. This story is getting to be a bigger story. It's being driven by that vocal minority. It's being driven by states, by policymakers, by organizations in virtually every sector. But we start every call with an employer by asking them, what the heck are you here for? Like, why are we having this conversation to begin with? And it's so important because The reasons for this are so many, but sometimes the puzzle is, how do we distill this down to the headline that's going to get this to the finish line within an organization? So often it's the case that the HR representative is they're already sold, and now it's a question of how do you get this through the organization to the C-suite. So up on the screen here is just one example, and I for many years our head of sales at retirementjobs.com was just so frustrated because she would say, gosh, Starbucks, one of the great names in our country, is so into this cafe program. They talk about it all the time, but they don't do any posting of positions on retirementjobs.com. Well, guess what? The reason for that was because they had no interest in talent acquisition of older adults, none whatsoever, because their focus was retention. And this is what they would say: we don't have a problem finding people, we have a problem keeping them. And so they knew that the tenure on average is 3 times longer than a younger, under age 50 person. But that was the headline for them, was retention. And so, that's what we talked to them about, is retention. Here's an organization, Publicis Group. This is the world's largest advertising agency. I am so thrilled that they are part of this program for so many reasons. One of the reasons is because it's the creative industries in this country and around the world, I believe, that are the last adopters. And it's probably where ageism is still at its worst, is in the creative industries. Here's an example of a major leader that has actually said, guess what? We need to join this, not only on behalf of ourselves, but on behalf of our clients. Now, why are they joining it? They know that from lots of different angles, it's a really, really important thing to go after. They are doing it partly driven by their own DE&I efforts, but on behalf of their clients, for whom they know this 50+ market is something that's impossible to ignore. Here's another person from Publicis Group just talking about the responsibility to mirror the market. So here again is language that is not unfamiliar, but it's the language that was top of mind for Publicis Group. And then here's Carol and Tandy, one of the great leaders in this country on the DE&I front. And she represents, a major organization. Before that, she represented another major organization and has brought Cafe, to the C-suite, which is, one of the things that's so important. And what's been exciting to me over these last few years, especially during COVID, is to see the degree of importance that this program and the topic in general has had at the most senior levels in the organization. And there are organizations that sometimes have a slow sales cycle because this is not a high priority. There are other organizations that have a slow sales cycle because it's so important and it's so relevant to the culture and the values and the brand of the organization that it's literally getting signed off on by the CEO of some of the Fortune 100 companies in this country. So this is such a complex topic. I sometimes look at the list of reasons that Doug laid out in that guide, and I say, well, if it's so great, then why isn't everybody doing it yesterday? And of course, it's not that simple. It's highly complex. It's very nuanced. And at the end of the day, I think we do our own prospects and customers, if you want to call them that, a disservice by trying to suggest that every older adult is perfect, because that is absolutely not true. And we need to acknowledge that this is a two-way conversation, and it's hard. But guess what? We are making headway, much more so in 2023 than in 2013 and 2006 when this whole program started. And I'm actually very optimistic about where this is all going, and I am so thrilled to be joined by more and more people on this bandwagon who are just high caliber and passionate and really interested for just all these different reasons. Let me just pause there, and I'll turn it back over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much for sharing those testimonials. It really gives insight into what people are really thinking, seeing the opportunities around this. Before we wrap up the panel here, I'd like to do a quick lightning round. And the question is this: if you could think of one selling point that would be especially effective in getting employers to pay attention to a topic like this, what would it be? Just one. Lisa, why don't we start with you?
I would say that older job seekers have those soft skills. They're showing up on time. They know about accountability. They are good at communication. And that's what we hear from employers is the hardest to get.
In a way, lower maintenance, especially the relationship side and being able to show up on time, all those basics. Thanks, Lisa. Kelly?
I think mine is maybe more of a tip about thinking about going into organizations, but I think one is to remember that while a lot of the people on this call are extremely steeped in this information, that you've been thinking about it, talking about it for a long time, the people you're going to, some of this is new to them. So go, keep that in mind, that you're going to need, that you really need to start with education. And the other thing I would offer is go where the energy is. Often people 50 plus in organizations are the ones who are fired up about this. So follow their energy, and they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to sort of, propel you forward.
Super. Thanks very much. And finally, Tim, you got a one major pointer for us?
Oh, is that Tim as in me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think that as I'm seeing here in the chat, I think that at the end of the day, getting this from priority 7 to priority 2 is the name of the game. And I think boiling it down to the bottom line is really critical.
Super. Good. Thanks very much. Thanks to all of you. I'm going to now go back to Doug. And Doug, if you'd like to spend a few minutes talking about what the initial campaign for promoting the guidebook looks like.
Unmute myself before I talk. Yes, thank you, Tim. Now that we have the guide, we have the next step, which is how do we get into the hands of the people who can most use it? And as Tim suggested, Tim Driver, with too many Tims on this and Kellys and so on this program. The challenge is to get it in front of people, but also to raise the priority. So I'm going to share my screen again. We've put together, can everybody see that? It's all right, good. So we've put together a list of suggestions. I think the thing to think about here is that there's a first, second, and third step here. The first step is to do the obvious, and that is to leverage our own connections, leverage the people in our network that we know that can lead us to others. And I think that's the way in which we always start these things. We'll also be working on some campaigns and some other ways to get the word out there. And we've already started that, and Janine will have an opportunity to talk about that in a second. But before we do anything else, we need to take advantage of our own connections. So we've come up with 12 suggestions for ways that each of us can use this guide, not just in our own work, and I think there are lots of ways in which that can happen, but also to begin to push this into the networks of people we know and introduce it in ways that can help to create a kind of organic or virtual, viral is the word I'm looking for, process. So the thing to think about, I think, in this process is that it's not enough, and I think this gets to Tim's point about getting it from priority 7 up the list. It's not enough for us to think about one introduction. I think the more angles, the more times, the more repetition that we build into the process, the more times an employer hears about this, the more points of entry into the organization, the more convincing I think it will ultimately become. And in particular, the more they hear from the people they rely on, both within and outside the organization on this topic. And the more times they hear about this from the people that, or the groups that they listen to, the more convincing I think the case will be. So I think that's something for us to keep in mind as we think about ways each of us can leverage our own connections to help make the guide available. So the first thing that we're suggesting is that each of us make a list of 10 people. That's not such a tall ask. That's just a few of the people that we know. But think about it from the perspective of who you know that can be of influence, that can make a direct connection, that can help in either a direct or an indirect way. And some of the suggestions on the right side of the page can be helpful, I think, in terms of people that you know that are part of business groups like the chambers or the Rotary clubs, through the workforce development and economic development centers, the one-stop career centers, government agencies, and so on, both at a local and a state level. Discussion groups, if you're a member of a book group or a member of an ERG, or I was part of a conversation yesterday in which there was an opportunity to introduce this topic because they were talking about the impact of age and ageism, and that was my cue. Reporters and others who cover topics related to this, and podcasters and so on. So there are a lot of different entry points. Think of this as a big house with a lot of little doors, and which of those doors can you open, or which are already open and you can walk through. So make that list, send the guide, attach a message. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then I think it's important to follow up. It's not just enough to introduce. So pick a few, follow up, make sure they got it, make sure they understand it, see what else they might need that might be helpful, see how they can be an ally with you in this work. Social media is a great tool for getting the word out, and Janine will talk about that in just a second. We have by the way, I'm skipping over number 4, but I'm going to come back to it. We have a sample op-ed or opinion article that you can take a look at if you have an opportunity to place that in a local paper or in a newsletter or something else that is within your purview. Take advantage of this opportunity. Create a blog post or a newspaper article, rather a newsletter article, and we've got a sample for you to take a look at there as well. Back to social media. I think that I'm going to let Janine talk about that, and we also have an exciting announcement that Janine will make as well. So I think the message before Janine takes it is pull out all the stops. Take a first step, learn from that. Take a second step, learn from that, and move forward. This is something that I think we're at the beginning of. Producing the guide is step 1. Getting the guide into the hands of those who can use it is step 2, and that will take our time over a period of months. It's not a one and done situation. Janine?
I have unmuted myself, and Doug, can you stop sharing? Because I want to share something for a moment. So it's so fun to see everybody. I think those of you who know me know how passionate I am about the issue of older workers, not only in my work in changing the narrative as the former chair of the Encore Network, currently on the board of CWI Labs. And this is just such an important resource. So I so appreciate everybody who worked on this. So how does social media play in? we have an opportunity to really engage other people who care about the issue of older workers, but who aren't necessarily familiar either with the Encore Network or that this resource has been produced, and to magnify it. And at Changing the Narrative, one of the things we've always done, and we say we hijack Older Americans Month. So for those of you who may not know, May is Older Americans Month. And I always like to think about how can we take the theme of Older Americans Month. So for example, what we've done at Changing the Narrative is we've recorded a series of videos that say, what if aging were unbound by ageism? But for the Encore Network, knowing that this incredible resource was going to be produced, we have formed what I call a social media pod of people who have agreed to amplify this once a week throughout May. And so if you are interested, and basically all it would involve, if you are interested, is putting your email in the chat. I will add you to a list that will get an email from me early every Monday morning saying, and so you've only got what, two more Mondays to go. Basically, you put your email in the chat. We will send you a sample message. We'll send you a link to the guide, and you can basically just, copy and paste. And then you'll know who else is involved in this pod. So you can go ahead and go and like and comment, because one of the things we know, especially on LinkedIn, is it's not just liking and sharing. If we comment on each other's, it brings us up in the algorithm. And so this message is going to go a lot further. Here is what we are. So usually we have done this on Monday since May started. It's the Encore Network's Older American Month post focused on this employer guide. We realized late last week that we had this incredible opportunity that I'm going to share with you. So today what we are doing is sharing the fact not only that this guide has been launched, but here is where I'm going to share my screen. So some of you, I'm sure many of you are aware of Working Nation, which is one of the leading publications that really covers workforce and the future of work, and with somewhat of a focus on older workers. And I had the privilege of talking to Ramona, who's editor-in-chief there, last Friday, and she had become aware of this guide. And she said, let's go ahead and republish a recent report that Working Nation and CWI Labs had released called Overlooked and Sidelined. And it's about older workers in the United States, and especially older workers of color. And I know that there was a question about that in the chat. So what basically has happened is, as of today, this guide, the new guide, Age is a Strategic Imperative, this guide has now been included in Working Nation and CWI's lab, Overlooked and Sidelined. So what I'm going to stop sharing right now, I'm going to put a link to this in the chat. And what I would like each of you to do today is to go ahead and share not only the guide with, but also that it is in Working Nation's newly released or re-release of their publication Overlooked and Sidelined. So we've just got an incredible opportunity here. Go ahead, if you're interested in amplifying the message, go ahead and again, just put your email in the chat. I will forward you the email that I sent to people. I call us the pod, the Encore Network pod. I will go ahead and forward anybody who puts their email in the chat, the Encore Network pod email that we sent out this morning with a sample and what to share. Let me know what platforms you're on. So if you're on LinkedIn, this is a great platform for LinkedIn. I also think it's a great platform, a great publication to publicize on Twitter and share on Twitter. And we can do that among ourselves. So happy to take any questions, but I think this is a great opportunity to share. I want to give you one example of when we've been able to do this before. So there is this incredible group called Crow's Feet. A woman named Nancy Peckinham attended the Encore Network April program. She ended up writing an article for Crow's Feet based on what we talked about in the April program. She's got a really large forum on Crow's Feet. I looked literally the next day and 1,000 people had weighed in. So this is the kind of thing that each of us have the opportunity. We all have networks, but by kind of sharing this on social media, we're really amplifying the kind of message and impact that we can have. So Doug, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted me to say, but the big news was that Working Nation and CWI Labs literally re-released their report and today and have put this guide in it. So.
Janine, thanks very much. Doug, thank you for that.